Is the 31st of October, Tuesday, 2023. Here, thank you very much. I think I'm back on. So today is the day that everyone has been waiting for, when the extraordinary summit of the heads of state of the Southern African Development Community were set to meet, and they did meet in the morning. Inconclusive. The meeting today was inconclusive. We know that what was under discussion were the security issues in the region, issues of good governance in the region, and also Zimbabwe would feature prominently together with Eswatini, which recently held their elections, and the Zimbabwe elections in particular, which were held on the 23rd of August. And the background is that the SADC electoral observer mission produced a scathing report on Zimbabwe, where it said the Zimbabwean election did not meet the constitutional standards, that is the standards of the Zimbabwean constitution, the standards or the requirements of the Electoral Act of Zimbabwe, and also the SADC guidelines guiding democratic elections. So it was, basically it said that election was a sham. And though they said it was peaceful on the day of the election, they actually noted those shortcomings. So we saw the final report was a bit watered down when it came out, and it only gave recommendations as to what the Zimbabwean government needed to do. But what the final report also did, which is very, very crucial, is that it still maintained that the Zimbabwean election fell short or came short of the required standards constitutionally and according to the guidelines of SADC. Now, today, those obviously were the issues that were under discussion. But now, reports are that this meeting was inconclusive, and we get this from the short communique that was released at the end, and I'm going to share it with you right on the screen. Here is the short communique which they released. So the press release, rather, it says the extraordinary summit of SADC heads of state and government to reconvene on 4th November 2023 in Luanda, Angola. 31 October 2023, Gaborone, Botswana. The virtual extraordinary summit of the Southern African Development Community, SADC, heads of state and government, which started today, the 31st October 2023, will reconvene in person in Luanda, Republic of Angola, on 4th November 2023. The summit will finalize discussions on the consolidation of peace, security, and governance in the SADC region, The SADC summit is responsible for the overall policy direction and control of function of the community. That statement is important. The SADC summit is responsible for the overall policy direction and control of function of the community. Now, it issued by SADC Secretariat from Gaborone, 31st of October. So there you have it. It was inconclusive today, and it is set to reconvene on Saturday, the 4th of November, and this time in person. So we are expecting that is when the final communique will then be released, which will talk to the issues that will be under discussion. However, what was worrying, and which I know most people are talking about, is what the chairperson of the SADC, the current chairperson, that is Mr. João Lourenço of Angola, of the Republic of Angola, who, as the chairperson of SADC, in his opening remarks, congratulated President Mnangagwa for what he called an exemplary election. And I quote, that again is a worrying development. It is a worrying development in that it is exposing the contradictions within SADC. And if what he said in his opening remarks is representative of what the SADC thinks of the Zimbabwean election, then it can only be that there are contradictions within SADC, number one, or that there is polarization which may have led to division within SADC itself as to how to characterize those elections, because their organ, or the organ which they set up, the SIOM, says on one hand that election was a sham, that election did not meet the constitutional requirements, the electoral law requirements, the SADC guidelines. It clearly said it. And the final report even said that that election fell short. And remember, the Troika meeting also went on to rebuke ZANU-PF and government officials who had gone trashing Dr. Nevas Mumba and the rest of the SIOM. They rebuked them. Now, you cannot have the head, the SADC chairman, congratulating Zimbabwe and telling us that those elections were exemplary. That is contradictory. So it can only expose that there is division within SADC itself as to how to characterize these elections. Otherwise, it leaves us to speculate that on the outside or in the public, SADC has had to take a certain position. Probably they are also implementing strategic ambiguity, where they are, on one hand, they are telling us that the elections were a sham with the SADC SIOM report, and then presidents coming out congratulating President Mnangagwa. Yet maybe behind the scenes, there are delicate talks. That's only what we can deduce from that there are still delicate talks, and which explains weirdly why this extraordinary summit has been pushed to Saturday. And the Saturday extraordinary summit would be in person. In today's summit, I understand that there was only one president, the president of Tanzania, who was represented, but all other presidents of SADC were there. But this time, after they went into the closed session, that closed session was the one that was inconclusive. In other words, they could not exhaust the discussions. They could not come to an agreement as to what is the way forward, which explains why all the heads of state now have to gather and talk in Luanda. So there is still a lot of hope. I'm sure there is heated debate there. There is heated debate as to how to move forward, because truly you cannot have your observer mission telling you that the election was a sham, that the election did not meet the standards, that the elections violated your own guidelines on one hand, and on the other hand, then you come up and say the elections were exemplary. That is a contradiction which cannot be acceptable. However, if SADC were to then move on with this narrative that these were exemplary elections, this will put a nail into the very coffin of SADC. In other words, if SADC had any semblance of respect, it means now it will be a useless, toothless dog. I mean, it will be a meaningless a club of dictators that are there to just cuddle each other and not tell the truth, because their own mission that they sent, these heads of state, came up with a conclusion, and that conclusion was a scathing one, that President Mnangagwa did not hold a credible, a free and fair election. And therefore, what is expected from the extraordinary summit of the heads of state is to face their counterpart. It is to confront their counterpart on how he handled that election. And we know, it is known what happened on that election. The run up to the election itself was started. We saw the delimitation report was controversial to the time we go to the elections. The way it was handled, the way it was produced, it did not meet the standards of a proper delimitation report. In fact, it was a gerrymandering report. We saw the issue of the voters' roll, which was not availed to the members of the opposition and the generality of Zimbabweans to inspect, which caused a lot of confusion on voting day. We saw the opposition rallies, the CCC rallies were banned. More than 100 rallies were banned. We saw violence meted against the CCC supporters, and that with impunity. No member of ZANU-PF has ever been brought to book. We saw the judiciary being weaponized, used for the whole time. From the time the president proclaimed those elections, the CCC was kept in courts because of bogus cases. At some point, the 12, Bulawayo 12 were denied to register because of what ZANU-PF had caused itself, right? And all those things pointed to a very flawed election. We saw on voting day, there was serious, massive voter suppression as ballot papers did not reach the urban areas where the CCC has massive support, and that alone shows you that this election cannot stand. But not only that, the media, especially the state media, was used against the alternative, and also the alternative did not get airtime on the state media, be it print or the television media. All that. Not only that, the ZEC, the constitution of ZEC itself, has always been a bone of contention, that it is staffed by the children of top ZANU-PF officials. The child to Mr. Kembo Mohadi is in the ZEC. The child to Obet Mpofu is in ZEC. The child to the Foreign Minister Frederick Shava is in ZEC. The Mangwanas, we know they are full-scale ZANU-PF operatives, are in ZEC. And how do we expect ZANU-PF to run in an election in which they will lose? That alone shows you that that election was a sham. It was flawed. It was null and void. And the SIOM report brought that out. Now, I am saying all this to show the contradiction when the SADC chairman, Mr. Joao Lourenço, comes out to congratulate President Mnangagwa for what he calls exemplary elections. What exemplary elections? Where did he get that from? If it's not what has always been said about SADC, that it is a club of liberation movements that have become dictators, that are bent on abusing the rights of their own people, and they only gather to congratulate themselves, and they only gather to pat each other in the back, and they cannot peer review each other, they cannot improve each other to make sure that they bring good governance to their countries. This is what is happening. But I will not preempt the final communique, because that final communique will now come after the 4th of November. So, but hope is still there, because obviously today's inconclusive meeting meant that there were pressing issues. There were issues that could not be agreed virtually, because this is a hot issue. The Zimbabwean issue is a very hot one, and sources are saying it has divided that SADC. And for SADC to remain relevant, it has to come up with a conclusive decision on Zimbabwe. And there are only two main decisions that it can make for it to remain relevant. I mean, for SADC to remain relevant. These two decisions that have to come is to order that a fresh election be held in Zimbabwe, because the report says this election did not meet the requirements. Number one. Number two, if they have to try and shepherd a peaceful settlement to what has obviously become a conflict in Zimbabwe, they then have to bring President Mnangagwa and Advocate Nelson Chamisa to the table to discuss a government of national unity, or a transitional arrangement in which all the issues of around the elections have to be settled in preparation for the next election. Whatever outcome of that negotiation should be centered on making sure that conditions for a free and fair election are put in place, whether for 2028 or for whatever time that has to be agreed. But again, this SADC summit cannot play blind to what is happening in Zimbabwe currently, particularly the recalls that are happening. SADC summit surely cannot pay a blind eye, which is why I think they have had to meet in person, in which I think CCC representatives are also going to be there to make their representations as to what is happening. The CCC, through its president and through its officials that are known, has clearly said they have not recalled any of their parliamentarians from the National Assembly. However, the ZANU-PF official who is the speaker, that is Jacob Mudenda, has paid a blind eye, a closed ear to that, a deaf ear rather, and said, and immediately wrote a letter to Zec to say there are vacancies. Zec, which is staffed with children of the top ZANU-PF officials, immediately informed the president of the vacancies. And the president did not waste time and gazetted the days of the by-elections. What a shame. You can see a plan by ZANU-PF. And the CCC, through its president and everyone, we know to be an official, is saying we did not recall anyone. And so Sadc cannot play cannot surely put a blind eye, cannot put a deaf ear to this situation that is unraveling in Zimbabwe. If surely they are discussing issues of peace and security and good governance in the region. Okay, this was a short update. We will come with more updates as and when more information on this SADC extraordinary summit comes out. But for now, it's a very, very good evening to all our viewers. Thank you.